Hello everyone, it's the Historical Gamer once again, and today I'm returning to Steel Division, Normandy 44, the new game out by Eugen Systems and published by Paradox Interactive. Steel Division is a real-time strategy game that puts you in the shoes of one of the warring powers during the Normandy invasions of 1944. Fittingly, we are on the, 73rd anniversary here this year, over the next few days. So I figured I would go ahead and play the game and talk about it a little bit as well in one of my videos. This video is the first part of a series that's going to be looking at the American campaign in the game. So Steel Division has 3 campaigns. It has Mission Boston, which puts you in the shoes of the United States 82nd Airborne Division, the All-American Division. The Atlantic Wall campaign, which puts you in the shoes of the Germans trying to repel the Allies. And Operation Epsom, which takes place several weeks later and puts you in the shoes of the British attempting to begin the breakout of Normandy and the seizure of Caen, which is kind of the key critical crossroads on the Allied left flank and was an objective for the first day of the battle, but did not fall for some 3 weeks later. Now in this video, like I said, I'm going to be taking a look at the American campaign, in which you play as the 82nd Airborne, or the All-American Division. In this scenario, the mission is the codename for the U.S. 82nd Airborne Division's combat drop over Courtenen on June 6th. So the 82nd is a veteran division from Sicily and Italy, played a crucial role in D-Day, and helped secure the extreme right flank of the invasion along the American flank. The drop went better for the 82nd than the 101st, as the 101st was much more scattered. The 82nd was still very much scattered and under strength as it attempted to seize its key objectives. The key strategic point was the city of Sainte-Mere-Eglise, which is the crossroads at the Meriden crossing, I believe, which was again a key Allied objective early on in the campaign. Sort of on one flank, on the British flank, you had Caen, which was the key British objective. On the other flank, you had Sainte-Mere-Eglise, which was the key crossroads of the American side of the Normandy invasions. So that's sort of the overview of the 82nd's objective on D-Day, the seizure of Sainte-Mere-Eglise, and I believe that's what the 4 battles that will take place in this scenario are all about, or in this campaign are all about. You can see here the first battle is Mission 1, Hedgerow Hill. Our primary objective for my task force is to secure the crossing of Oudeville-le-Hurt, and again, I'm sorry, my pronunciations are terrible, and ambush any German forces attempting to move against Omaha Beach, the eastern or the right flank of the American force. Then once we attack those forces, counterattack, and attempt to drive and open the way to Sainte-Mere-Eglise for the 4th Infantry Division, which is coming off Omaha Beach. Speed is of the essence. Your secondary objective is to locate and silence the heavy anti-tank guns and howitzers, slowing the 4th Division's advance. Okay, with that said, let's go ahead and jump into this battle, and I'm going to sit back and allow the narrator to kind of do their little spiel, which introduces you to the American campaign. Eugen Systems did a little bit of work to try and add a little bit of atmosphere to these intros in a way that they didn't do in their previous videos, so let's just sit back and enjoy it.
Last night, American and Allied airborne forces boarded their planes and took off towards France. Shortly after midnight this morning, and despite the German anti-aircraft defenses, our boys set foot behind enemy lines in Normandy. In the meantime, at dawn, the greatest armada ever assembled opened fire and proceeded to land assault troops on the shores of France. The liberation of Europe is underway as we speak.
Both airborne divisions have been blown to the 4 winds all over the Cotentin Peninsula. Let's hope it'll disorganize the Germans as we planned. Half the men have been misdropped, sir, including ourselves. We seem to have landed at the boundaries between our 82nd and the 101st. Way too far from the division's objectives at Sainte-Mere-Eglise and the bridges over the Merdere River. Yet, we aren't the only ones completely off mark. The first amphibious assault wave has just hit the beach right on schedule, but much further south than planned. That is, just east of our present position. New orders from Division HQ, sir. You are placed in charge of a provisional task force, gathering any isolated paratroopers in the area, whatever their unit, and securing Eau-de-Ville-la-Hubert to allow our ground force to exit the beach as quickly as possible. The city and vicinities are held by a mere company of infantry. We must seize it as quickly as possible and put Eau-de-Ville in a state of defense to repel any attempts by the Germans to recapture it, and then counterattack quickly to open the way. The German coastal defenses are manned by auxiliary troops of poor military value, but they are supported by heavy guns. Any help we could provide in destroying those guns would hasten the amphibious forces' advance inland.
Okay, as you can see, that's sort of the intro. Our objective is going to be seize Eau-de-Ville, which is, looks like we're going to have forces on both sides of the town. So we've got paratroopers in the east and we've got paratroopers on the west, which is an interesting proposition. The enemy's going to be in a poor defensive position to begin with. You can see here, just overlooking our order of battle, we've got a bunch of infantry to choose from, some limited support units such as some jeeps with some machine guns mounted on them to choose from. We have no armor to choose from. But again, we've got a mixture of glider infantry, mixture of riflemen. We do have some artillerymen, not just mortars, which you would expect on any paratrooper unit, but also apparently some M305mm howitzers, which would have been dropped in or brought in by glider troop. And you can see here, we've already got some forces on the map that have been located, but we do have the ability to call in reinforcements as well. Despite the fact that we're paratroopers, I suppose that's just us calling in troops from, basically locating spare troops that have dropped in. Now, with that being said, you can also see, well, actually, first, I'm going to go ahead and call in some infantry. I'm going to put some infantry here on the left, because we have very few forces here on the left. So I'm going to call in some 4 infantry men there. I'm also going to call in some recon units. We'll put some on the left, and I think I'll put some on the right as well to ensure that I've got, some eyes and ears as I move forward. We can see we've got some artillery already on map. That should be useful, those 60mm mortars there I just hovered over briefly. And we'll go ahead and put some pathfinders on the map as well, which kind of act like elite infantry, but they're not really as well equipped to fight stand-up battles. Really, your AB rifles are going to be the key infantry troops, as well as maybe some gliders as they become available. You can see here we're already in some dense terrain, in the bocage, as you will, of the Normandy countryside, and we're advancing toward this town. I don't know why we're all in jeeps, or trucks, if you will. It seems a little bit unlikely, but one of the first things I'll do is get these guys out of these trucks, because, frankly, we're not far enough away from our objective to warrant taking the risk of getting hit in the truck and losing a large percentage of our force. So with that being said, let's see here, we've got a jeep with a 30 cal. That'll provide some support fire. We've got some troops up here on the top left as well, and then we've got the town in the middle. We're starting pretty close to the enemy, but I think what we'll do is we'll move some infantry up here on the right into these villages, or sorry, these buildings in this sort of outskirts of Eau-de-Ville, seize these buildings, and then advance further. But once I get these buildings, that'll give us kind of a base of defensive terrain where we can kind of launch our offensive. It looks like there's another set of buildings here just to the left of the buildings I'm going to occupy. I don't know where the enemy is, but I'm guessing they'll be in some of these buildings, probably not in the ones in the blue area that I'm moving my men forward to, since that's going to be, that's already in our friendly territory, but maybe these other buildings right across the way. So maybe going, little village to launch some assaults and take this terrain. I'm trying to zoom in here a bit to give you a sense of some of the graphics, but this game really, to me, is played mostly from the top down. It's a game that is tempting you to zoom in and look at a lot of things in detail, and yet rarely do you have the time to enjoy the visuals that are there if you get a chance to look at them. With that being said, one other thing I noticed in this campaign, in this battle, is that as you click on units and tell them to do things, you give them orders, there seems to be a mixture of quotes from Saving Private Ryan and also very heavily for the Airborne guys from, well, at least the Airborne guys I've seen, from the Bandar Brothers movie, which are series of the mini-series, which is kind of funny and also kind of, I don't know if insulting is the right word, but we're fighting with the 82nd Airborne and we're getting all sorts of quotes from a series known about the 101st, and I think that's one thing that, I wouldn't say it bothered me, but I find it very interesting as we go ahead here and get started. I'll start moving my forces forward. Like I said, I already issued those orders, and you can actually see up here in north, we can look and we can see the 4th Infantry Division coming ashore on the beaches with these airborne aircraft coming over. That was redundant. We've got some DD tanks, some inflatable tanks that basically can go across the water, and we've got these troops coming off the beaches, pinning down these German troops. So there's a whole other battle to the north being fought by these troops attempting to break out. But with that being said, the quotes from Bandar Brothers is, you know, you even hear some stuff of like, easy company, move out, and other things like that, which is, I don't have an issue with Bandar Brothers. I enjoy the series quite a lot. I think it's a very well done show. But I think one thing that gets lost, one thing that often gets lost in this entire series, or in this in our understanding of the history of World War II, is the effort that the 82nd Airborne, which is what we're playing as, put in. And it just seems odd to me to have a whole bunch of quotes. And again, it's not a big deal. I'm not upset by it. I just find it kind of interesting, because when we think of World War II in the United States, and we think of Normandy, we think of Omaha Beach, which ignores Utah Beach, which was another beach that troops landed at. It just wasn't kind of the bloody quagmire that Omaha Beach was. Utah Beach is the other beach. But you can see here we're starting to run into some enemy troops, so they appear to have occupied these buildings just beyond the way. So we'll kind of hop building by building to try and get to them, and hopefully use our artillery to suppress them and allow our troops to move forward. I'm very grateful to have these mortars here. Looks like the enemy does have a vehicle as well, although it's a light vehicle, so hopefully our troops can deal with it on its own. But as I was saying, the common history of World War II in Normandy is you've got Omaha Beach, which is sort of this death trap, and you've got, you know, movies like Saving Private Ryan, which really illustrate that. And then you've got the 101st Airborne, which is illustrated by the Bandar Brothers series, which is a very well done series, but really only looks at the 101st and only looks at one piece of the 101st. And so our popular understanding of the invasions of Normandy were that we had these green troops coming in, not a lot of experience. You know, there were some Rangers at Point to Hawk. I think people in general, that's a little bit of there's a little bit of popularity around that, or understanding around that. But you've got the Omaha Beach invasion, which, veteran or not, was bloody. And then you've got these green paratroopers from the 101st, no combat experience, dropping in behind enemy lines and you know, doing what they do as part of the invasion. And it kind of portrays this view of U.S. forces being green, untried, you know, not brand new to this this war, and also a very American-centric one as well, which is, you know, I'm an American, so whatever, right? But it tells a bit of a fake story around Normandy. So regarding the American-centric, the U.S. had 2 beaches. There were 5 beaches in Normandy. There were 2 American beaches, there were 2 British beaches, and there was a Canadian beach. So there were actually more Commonwealth forces than there were American forces. I'm reading Con Anvil of Victory right now, and the initial assault included 80,000 Commonwealth, roughly. That includes Canadians and British, I believe. Only 70,000 Americans. 2/3 of all aircraft that took place during the initial D-Day attacks, some 12,000 aircraft, 2/3, we're talking more than 60%, were British or RAF aircraft. I never would have guessed that the air power was that disproportionately on the sort of old empire's side. if you look at the naval ships, there were like something like 1,200 warships, not just transports, but something like 1,200 warships, and of those, only 200 were American. The other 1,000 were Royal Navy. Something like 4,000 or so transports and whatnot, and I think only about 800 of them were American. And so we sort of have this image of Normandy being this, American-led, attack. Again, it's a story we hear because we're Americans, and at least, those of you who are listening who are in America, sort of this American-centric approach of teaching history around it, and it kind of ignores the sacrifices, the efforts that everybody else made. And, they were a bigger part of the initial landings. Now, as the war went on, as the full force of the Allies came ashore, the war effort became a greater and greater effort from the Americans, and their percentage of involvement began to eclipse the Commonwealth and the British in of themselves. But at least initially, the commander of the ground forces was Monty, and there's, the British general, Montgomery. And there's a reason for part of that. Part of that is due to the fact that, you can see here I'm trying to flank these guys. So there's a Panzerschreck and some infantry, trying to move my infantry behind them. Meanwhile, I'm going with more of a frontal approach in these buildings, which are very heavily defended. I've taken out their vehicle, but I've also lost some troops already. And now I've just got a secondary objective as well to destroy some artillery pieces up north. But I think it just does it a little bit of a disservice when we never really hear that full story. I think if you're looking for a movie or a book to kind of tell that whole story, a good one to look at would be Longest Day. It is very much a dramatic war movie in the old sense. It is very much a movie that I wouldn't say glorifies war, but certainly makes war out to be maybe cleaner than it is. It's, the old, I think it was made in the 50s or early 60s, so it's one of those old movies. John Wayne's in it, actually. But it does a good job of telling the scope, telling the scale, telling the massive involvement of different units from different countries, not just being American-centric, in a way that I don't think any modern movie has. And I think that's something maybe worth checking out. I kind of got off on a side tangent, and that was the reason that I kind of went down this direction. Was my intent was to talk about the 82nd Airborne. As you see, I'm kind of assaulting these buildings, trying to get these Germans to surrender, trying to push them back just with an overwhelming force. While I try and suppress them a bit with my 30 cal on this Jeep. We're not moving as quickly as we would like. Certainly, we've used half of our available time. We had 10 minutes. We've used 5. But on our left flank, anyway, the enemy's been cleared out, so we can start advancing on the town itself, and on the right flank, that should help us maybe get into the rear of these guys. This is a really strong defensive position, it seems. But we're slowly advancing. I'm trying not to kill all of my troops. I don't know if any of you saw my previous videos, the first look videos of Steel Division, where I played the British campaign, Epsom, which saw me get absolutely annihilated. So I'm trying to be a little bit more cautious, use my artillery very aggressively. One thing I've noticed with this game is just how important artillery is to really give your guys a chance to not get killed. You can see these German units, their little heart thing cracked. I believe that means their morale is broken. So we're moving in on Odive, and I think we're going to take it with relative ease. But as I was saying, I think one of the reasons I was mentioning Longest Day, one of the reasons I was mentioning the Commonwealth commitment to Normandy is not to de-emphasize the American commitment, but more to talk about the 82nd Airborne. And that's because, again, I was mentioning earlier that the 82nd Airborne is sort of this unit that gets lost in the story of D-Day. It gets lost behind the glory, if you will, or at least the portrayed glory, of Easy Company and the 101st. It gets lost behind the slaughter of Omaha Beach. It gets lost in the general narrative of the American, effort. And that is, the 82nd Airborne defies a lot of the stereotypes of Normandy because it was a crack division coming in. The 101st was green. It was made up of some elements of the 82nd, some training forces that had been broken off from earlier efforts, but it was a division that was a crack. The 82nd was a crack division. The 101st had no combat experience before Normandy. So the 101st was sort of these green boys, not been involved in combat, dropping in. The 82nd Airborne had fought in Sicily. They had done a combat drop in Sicily. They had done a combat drop, I believe it was during the Salerno invasions in Italy. They had fought extensively in Italy. They had 2 combat jumps and a half-dozen battles and engagements to their name. They were the crack veterans going in to Normandy. and they get lost in the history of all the other units. They get lost in this, you know, mythology that's been put up, and they get lost in sort of the afterglow, maybe of Bastogne. I'm not sure what it is, but the 101st comes out of World War II and into modern-day history is kind of being regarded as the elite of the American airborne units. And for those for those people not in the know, it seems as if the 82nd gets ignored, and despite the fact that the 82nd today is the only remaining airborne qualified division. The 101st is now air assault for choppers. The 101st had, you know, a extensive history as being a great fighting unit since, but again, so has the 82nd. And so if you're just an ordinary person who hasn't done anything other than watch Saving Private Ryan and watch Bandar Brothers, then you probably don't know much about the 82nd, despite the fact that at least up until Bastogne, arguably the 82nd's accomplishments were, if not as good, perhaps even better than what the 101st had accomplished, in spite of everything that we hear from, the popular media. So that was one reason I'm actually really happy that Steel Division, and you can see here, it seems like I've taken the town. I've still got one German unit here, but the whole town is in our control. We're pushing north, and I'm now calling in some units to prepare for the eventual counterattack that I think will be coming. So I'm calling in some machine guns. I'm going to call in some anti-tank guns here to try and make sure that we slow any German counterattack, which is surely to come once we take this town. This was the first time of me playing this particular scenario, so I'm making some hunches, but calling in 2 anti-tank guns and some machine guns to guard the road to the south in the direction of Sainte-Mere-Eglise. So, you know, while I'm expending forces up north, I want to make sure I'm getting into position as well to defend against the German counterattack. But that's one reason I'm really happy that Eugen Systems decided to include the 82nd Airborne as the U.S. campaign rather than the 101st, because we've all heard ad nauseum about the 101st, but we don't hear enough, in my opinion, about the 82nd. Interestingly enough, General Ridgway was the commander of the 82nd Airborne. He would end up becoming the commander of the 8th Army in the Korean... Well, actually, step back a second. So, and again, this is me getting my troops into position to receive a counterattack, which will originate from the south, directing north. But General Ridgway commanded the 82nd Airborne. General Maxwell Taylor commanded the 101st. When a airborne corps was formed with 3 airborne divisions, the command was given to Ridgway rather than Taylor. And this was during World War II. During the Korean War, General Ridgway was given command at the start of the war of the 8th Army, once its commander, I believe the highest-ranking American commander during the war to lose their life, lost their life during the retreat toward Busan. Ridgway would end up replacing MacArthur when MacArthur was sacked by by President Truman, and Ridgway would eventually become, I believe, became Chief of Staff, predating General Taylor. General Taylor would end up becoming Chief of Staff as well later. It's also interesting because the 2 commanders of the 101st and the 82nd, sort of the glory hound 101st, at least in terms of media perception, Taylor and then the 82nd, both had very different views of Vietnam later in their careers. General Taylor has been criticized by many as painting an overly rosy picture of the outlook in Vietnam, saying that, you know, to President LBJ, that, hey, we can do this. This is something we can, you know, doesn't take too much effort. Is something that we can get involved in and we can win. General Ridgway had a very different view. He said, listen, if we're going to win, it's going to take a massive effort of forces that we're not likely prepared to give. And he, you know, while Eisenhower, he was Chief of Staff during Eisenhower's term, while Eisenhower took his advice to a large extent, he was so aggressive and adamant in how the U.S. should limit itself in Vietnam that it ended up causing some friction between him and Eisenhower, and eventually Eisenhower decided not to keep him on. Taylor, on the other hand, played a very political game, and some historians have called him the most destructive general, despite his role as the commander of the 101st, which was undoubtedly exemplary. Many have considered him to have a very destructive role on the U.S.'s ability to wage war. In fact, some have called him the most destructive general in American military history because of his role in helping to instigate the Vietnam War. Well, that said, getting back, you can see here the German counterattack is coming. We have some orders to try and, or not orders, but suggestions to move north to attack some of these artillery batteries that are pounding the beaches. I don't have a ton of resources for that. You can see a German convoy is coming north. I've only positioned one of my artillery anti-tank guns well. The other one has no visibility on this convoy, so there we go. We just drilled one of the vehicles, knocked it out, and we can see the other guys are dismounting a ways out. We've got a whole bunch of troops opening them up on them now, ambushing them, and you know, look at all that gunfire going in on these Germans attempting to launch their counterattack. They've perhaps chosen the wrong time or the wrong tactic of moving up a road directly without cover. I only got one of their vehicles. I think I'll need to requisition some more vehicles. Maybe another anti-tank gun. I'm not sure. Probably some more artillery, actually. I'm moving my mortars into position here in the north. But I could use something a little bit heavier than what I have. A command car with a machine gun on top and some armor might be useful. Anyway, I'm moving my mortars down, getting supply down to hopefully get these troops ready to, able to resist for an extended period of time. This first German counterattack looks like it's probably company strength, maybe platoon, well, no, maybe platoon strength. Only 3 or 4 infantry units, depending on what we destroyed here. You can see we need to hold for 25 more minutes. We're moving at slow speed, so that's about a 1-to-1 with real time. They're engaging our anti-tank gun. I don't have enough infantry in the front here. I've got a machine gun jeep, a machine gun, and then a rifle unit in these buildings. A lot of these other troops in the area just don't have line of sight. I'm going to keep the troops on the left in their position, so if the enemy tries to sweep up around and flank us, we've got some troops there. And then I'm going to use my mortars to try and shell these guys. They're still relatively exposed in this roadway, so if I can get these mortars into position, get them to drop some fire on the enemy, they're pretty much sitting ducks to any accurate mortar fire. The enemy also have mortars, so I want to make sure I suppress those before they're able to start countering us. So you can see here, dropping mortar fire. That was accurate. The first shell destroyed an enemy anti-tank gun, and more shells are pinning the enemy down. They're already falling back. So I'll quickly adjust fire back to the rear as these enemies start to pull back out of very exposed positions. And hopefully drop fire a little bit further back. You can see here it looks like it's a little bit out of range, but we at the very least drove that first attack back. Once those mortars started firing on them, they were too exposed to be able to stick around. And I need to try and move this 57mm anti-tank gun forward a bit, so when the next inevitable German attack comes, they'll be able to shoot at those vehicles as well as they approach up the road. Okay, some contact in our rear here. It doesn't seem like the guys are making that much progress off the beach. There's a little bit, you can see one pincer of green kind of moving south as we watch the artillery slam into these German troops again, still kind of exposed in the road. But not a lot of movement here. Not as much as I would like. I'm not sure why that is. I don't know if there's more German troops I can't see on the map or not, but you can see here we drove 2 more German squads, or I think they're squads based on the number of men here. They appear to be squads back, and this mortar fire is proving invaluable. I don't understand why my anti-tank guns... whoa, I'm advancing a little bit too far forward. I don't understand why my anti-tank guns can't fire directly on infantry with, like, HE shells. It seems like they only have the ability to fire AP shells against vehicles, which is odd. I'm not quite sure about that. But anyway, the first assault thrown back. Guessing some more will come in here shortly. I'm going to bring in some glider infantry, actually. I'm going to bring them in here on kind of the flank to that road, so that if the enemy advances again, I've got a whole bunch of infantry here on the flank of the Germans that can keep them occupied. I'm also going to call in at least 1 howitzer battery here, bring in 1 heavier artillery piece that will hopefully help me continue maintaining the advantage I have from these mortars. I'm glad that my mortars can be so far back and fire so accurately. You can see here the enemy's got an MG in place. With that being said, we've thrown back the initial attack. We've taken Auduville, or however you pronounce it, and we've kind of probed north toward where some of these German guns are shelling the beachhead, but we haven't really had enough troops to spare to really make a serious effort of it. With that being said, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and cut this video off here. It's been about 30 minutes. I think There's probably about another 30 to go, just judging by there's 20 plus minutes left that I have to take or hold this town. Not sure if there's a counterattack period or anything like that. You can see here these guys look like they're kind of pinned down up there. So we're going to have to continue holding out until the cavalry arrives from the beaches, and then we can kind of start advancing. But with that being said, guys, I'm going to go ahead and end the video here. I hope you enjoyed the video as well as the discussion. And until next time, guys, this is the Historical Gamer saying thank you for watching, and I'm out.